Hey, it's Soul. This is Warcraft Weekly, and I have one question. Okay, I'm gonna have more than one question, but I'll kick it off with this one. How was your week? Right now, we're in the middle of the second half of the later half of the season, and we're mentally juggling a few things. Horrific Visions rotated from one stage to another, and I'm gonna talk more on that in just a few moments, but I've definitely noticed a drop off in the rhetoric surrounding the time gating of things. It's probably because, well, it's here now, but I'm also observing people reacting to visions now that it's on our plate of things to do, as opposed to a lot of us like analyzing and theory crafting player behavior due to the announcements, the news around visions from months back. But anyway, with this going on, next week we get to experience a different sort of event, Dastardly Duos, also releasing in stages as we wrap up this patch and move into the next one, bringing us more story and new delve things to do, another leveling event, and more. But it'll be easy enough to handle once we can, play with just one button. Back to Dastardly Duos though, we have some very pleasant news that the feature can be taken on solo. At first this was announced to be a group-centric activity, and there's nothing wrong with that really. I bet it's gonna be super fun to see gamers fight for the really high score, but now I'm very interested in checking this event out, knowing I don't have to wrangle guildmates together on some set schedule on an off-raid night. In case you haven't looked into it, here's how it works. Starting next week, we can queue up for Dastardly Duos with 1 to 5 players over in our main capital city or in Dornical. We'll be taken to a green room of sorts where we can pick up some zany powers to help us through, and then we can enter available matches, and more will be introduced as the weeks go by. The gameplay isn't something I can speak to, I didn't have time to test it out myself, but it looks like it's going to play very arcadey, like there's going to be a challenge flavor to it because you'll be dealing with multiple bosses and thus multiple boss mechanics overlapping on top of each other, and it's going to be a real hoot for those who've never fought some of these bosses before. But for the most part, it's going to be more about picking up crazy power-ups and trying out builds and loadouts and smashing for a high score and cosmetics and achievements. I think it's less of like a win-lose sort of situation, more like a win or win more kind of thing. So now all of a sudden I'm feeling more interested in what this group or solo event has to offer in this multi-course meal that is 1115. And that's kind of what I want to get into in the heart of today's weekly, solo content's rise in the world of Warcraft. I want you to take a step back with me and look at the WoW of today versus any previous time in WoW's history. Today, there's a lot of World of Warcraft that can be experienced without any other human players. It's endgame max level content, and it's not just group content you can do on your own because, there is that, but in the case of delves, it's almost an experience built for the solo player first that can be, done in a group as well. Think of all the things we can do on our own during this season, from the outdoor zone content to delves. Right now there's Horrific Visions, and next week there's going to be Dastardly Duos, and way later, player housing is going to introduce a new style of gameplay not seen in World of Warcraft before. This kind of freeform expression not unlike painting or building with Legos. It's a step away from combat and more like the evolution of collection. We'll soon be able to make creations out of our imaginations, and mark my words, we're going to see some awesome things that we never thought we'd expect. And it's mostly solo content with social options in this persistent world. World of Warcraft is more solo-friendly than ever before, and understandably, not everyone's a fan of that. There's always going to be that long-standing sentiment that the MMORPG genre should be all about more or less forced multiplayer, that the best rewards and the most fun things are done with friends and building relationships and that sense of camaraderie. While in its early days, it reflected that sentiment, and still, it was much more accessible compared to other MMOs in its generation. It was already trying to appeal to a more casual audience. Back in those days, the idea of soloing was limited to leveling and professions and seeing how well you can kite elites and dungeon mobs. Options were limited and epics were epics, all behind that social gate. Obviously, that definition of casual audience has changed over the years, not just WoW players, but gamers and, the rest of the world too. Like, where were you back during the Bush administration when gaming's hottest things were Grand Theft Auto San Andreas and there's a PlayStation Portable? Those of us who've been hooked to this game for over a generation, hey, we got older, our commitments grew. Our reflexes and willingness to stay up super late, not so much. Throughout WoW's past 20 years, the game has been trying to guess the right moves and playing catch up to the times. So that's meant more accessibility, more options for those of us who can't handle those really big 40-man groups, which went down to like 25 and 10, and then 20 and flex, and then 5-mans for dungeons, and now this solo seasonal endgame. And time is a soup. Let's throw classic in there for a crazy mix to bring players back to familiar times. It was when we could start queuing up for PvE content like dungeons and raids did the conversations really start picking up steam that WoW is starting to feel like a single-player game. The community's ruined, server identity is dead, WoW is going on console, and anyone can play with just one button. Everyone treats each other like a disposable, faceless pug. Players were encouraged to think only for their well-being because, hey, you never run into the same people twice anymore. And we talk about this a lot. It's one part problem, one part consequence of today's everything, because this isn't isolated to just WoW. We should keep having conversations and be open with our feedback on the game's direction because we all come from these different points of view. For many years, WoW's devs have been letting the pug world cultivate, where gamers can treat the game like a single-player experience, and your fellow players are kind of just random factors that help or hurt your chances of clearing that raid or timing that key. But we've been seeing a shift, especially in recent years. Blizzard is targeting what I would say its most underserved audience, the bona fide solo player. Now, this is different from the folks out there who might have main character syndrome, who treat their fellow players like less than people. I'm talking about gamers who love the World of Warcraft. They like knowing they're part of this persistent world, but they stop short of the interplayer activity because maybe they've always been solo, or their circumstances or preferences have changed. It's none of our business, but it's very clear by now Blizzard wants to break that old sentiment of what an MMORPG should be, innovating where they can and catching up where they need to. The World Soul Saga is this very ambitious milestone achievement that makes one wonder, what's on the other side of it? Is there going to be another saga? Is there going to be a World of Warcraft 2? Or is it just another one of Blizzard's experiments before trying something new? But we don't have to wait for the end of that to see huge changes. They're happening now. World of Warcraft has been changing in big strides ever since Shadowlands. For better or worse, everyone's getting more opportunities to have for themselves an adventure, an experience, a gameplay loop of facing a challenge, building themselves up to overcome it, and winning. The 2004 version of MMOs, it's not a dead genre. WoW Classic is still a thing that'll continue to be supported. Other old MMOs are still alive and thriving, and to call that audience a niche is reductive at best. But what about the 2025 version of MMOs? My opinion, WoW's been positioning itself to try to represent that, where you can find equally satisfying experiences with friends or strangers, or all on your own. But do you agree? I'd like to hear your thoughts. Since today's weekly is geared towards solo players, I want to share a bit. And a word of warning that this is not going to be me coming at you like a commentator being, kind of both sidesy, but a gamer, just like you, with preferences and likes and dislikes. Like all of you, I have many facets to my playstyle in World of Warcraft, and I'd like to take some time to put a spotlight on players like me who subject themselves to certain personal challenges in this or in other games. So a while back, when Horrific Visions were first introduced with the roadmap, I was freaking ecstatic because I really enjoyed this sort of roguelike gameplay that we don't really see in World of Warcraft. And I knew right away one of the big changes was definitely going to be the removal of keys to enter, meaning I could treat this like a roguelike. I can keep crashing against this over and over until I won. Most importantly, I get a lot of enjoyment from giving myself a personal challenge and was looking forward to how it would be presented here. Like with the Mage Tower, I was determined to beat the tank challenge with my main before the Tomb of Sargeras raid even released, which would have given me more item level upgrades and more throughput to beat it, but no, I wanted to do it beforehand, and I did. It was really satisfying. The Jailer's Gauntlet was a bit more arcadey, but I still wanted to conquer that as soon as possible. I also wanted to down Zekvir and the Underpin straight away. It took a bit longer than I'd like, but hey, it still felt great to beat him. There was, of course, the original Horrific Visions being a great solo challenge for its time despite its many flaws, so for it to come back, naturally I thought it would be a great personal accomplishment to clear it as soon as possible. But I want to be clear, anyone else who completed these kinds of challenges later in the season or the expansion, you should be just as proud for those achievements too. These are all personal points of pride for us that don't need to be compared. Now, it's not lost on me that this is very like 1% behavior, and not unlike what I'd see from folks who like lock in to get Keystone Master or greater in the first week of a season. The difference really here is that this is me talking about solo accomplishments. I've been saying that when it comes to time-gated or delayed releases of content, I hear you, I believe you, but for some people, and I'm one of them, this rollout of Visions is almost designed for my kind of playstyle because I could clear the field of other obligations before dedicating myself to this fleeting moment in time. And the time gating that I know some of you hate, it gives this opportunity to test my capabilities. Like if everything was just left open and I can choose which map I want to run at will, naturally I'd focus on powering myself up first and maxing everything out and then slam it all in one sitting if I could get away with it. Now I know for many of you, that's not the point. It's not about whether you can do it in one day and then scream, where's the content? But many gamers simply don't like feeling that restriction, that arbitrary gating. They feel like the game hasn't been truly released until everything's available. But I also think to myself, it's like 2 extra resets. Apart from the principle, I personally don't feel a significant impact that irreparably harms this as a feature. It doesn't hit the same if I were to instead artificially restrict myself, as in not take up talents and brag about it later. Again, it's that sense of pride with working with what the game has given me at that time and winning despite the shortcomings. For those of you who've been watching me for a while and are familiar with my tanking style, you see this on full display. I have this very distinct and weird sense of fulfillment. And for all the energy and rhetoric put into railing against the Vision schedule, hey, we're going to be over the hump in just a few days if the analysts are right. Visions are going to be fully opened up outside of the map rotation, and I'm going to have this fun story to tell of beating the hardest version of Visions before that. And yeah, I know I did it as a paladin tank. Don't take that away from me, okay? Anyway, putting my commentator hat back on, it's the cool and unfortunate thing about a game like World of Warcraft that the audience is so diverse and may have preferences that seem so unpopular and contradictory to fun. I just wanted to put a spotlight on players who fully embrace those sorts of opportunities, imperfect as it is. That diversity is what urges the devs to keep trying different things that might sound like a waste of dev time and resources, because there is no 50% of players love this one cool thing. Actually, I'm willing to take a guess that there is something 50% of players do like though, and it's leveling characters very fast, which is why we've been seeing these kinds of events come back each season. Compared to Visions, given how long it's been since Battle for Azeroth, maybe 5 years to bring something back is an okay enough wait, and that's the show. So it's going to be weird that because the Vision maps rotate, Orgrimmar is sort of cemented as the hardest Horrific Vision revisited map, because next week I'll have more perks than I did in Orgrimmar, so hey, for the Horde. But, I guess that's also one of those 1% comments, right? But still, I can't help but wonder if certain feedback from Visions is going to inform Blizzard how they continue developing Delves in the future. In just a few short weeks, we're going to see a small addition to Delves. I'm just hoping for something a bit more substantial for Delves in the future. I know I wouldn't mind a feature sort of similar to activating masks in Visions, not just to scale enemy health and damage, but to also add some risky or fun affixes, mostly for bragging rights or a pathetic bonus of gilded crests or something. But I also wouldn't mind if future Delves took a good look at the follower system and revamped it in such a way that, hey, maybe we can choose among a selection of followers based on just superficial preferences, and for the most part, gave them all the same abilities and specs and what have you. So it could be like the Dragonscale Expedition, it could be Chromie, or it could be our Order Hall bodyguards, or our people in our warband, or even Pokepoke, that little murder bot, right? So anyway, let's wrap things up and give a hearty thanks to the folks watching on stream. Y'all were putting up with a bunch of like vision runs and failures, and I hope watching gave you guys some tips on what not to do. A big thanks to our fellow patrons, and we can't forget about you, viewer. You made it to the end. You fed the algorithm, and I'm grateful. Next week is going to feel a little bit stacked with Dastardly Duos and the Stormwind Horrific Vision to knock out. It should be fun, but also adjustable, since duos have their own rollout schedule to not make it feel so overwhelming, aka GER time gating, right? So anyway, please like the video, subscribe for more WoW coverage, catch me live, and I'll catch you later. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.